it be that when we don't show a culture of hospitality, Jesus pivots in the opposite direction and he talks to the person that feels like the outsider, that feels like they're the person that doesn't belong? Could it be that Jesus is turning his back on many North American churches because they don't make people feel hospitable? Because they don't make room for new people. Jesus turned his back on a culture that didn't make room for new people. All right, let's get into it. Now, when I was growing up, I'm sorry, my mom is watching online in Florida. Mom, I'm sorry, I'm going to get at you here in a second. But, all of these things happen so that we can preach a decent sermon. Okay, Mom? So please forgive me. I'll call you this afternoon. But when I was growing up, we had an infamous white living room. Everything in our living room was white. The rug was white. The couches were white. The table was white. Everything in there was white, and my mother loved it. It was the holy of holies. You couldn't go in there with shoes. You couldn't go in there with toes. It was sacred. It was holy unto Norma. Not unto the Lord, but unto Norma, my mom. She loved that white living room so much, I felt like I had to wear a hazmat suit just to go into it because it was her pride and joy. She went to London and bought these beautiful pieces, these white vases, and everything was just so gorgeous. And you could not go into our living room unless you were dressed in the most sacred outfit. It's like we never, ever went into it. It was just something we looked at and enjoyed. We just told people we had a living room, but we never ate in it. My mom loved it. She curated it, but it wasn't useful for people. It wasn't useful for our family, and visitors could never go into it. In my entire life as a teenager, I saw one person go in there, and it was my father-in-law, who was my pastor. He got to go in there because obviously he was holy, right? Like, he got to go in there. Me and my whole family were tripping out like, what is he doing drinking tea in our living room? It wasn't the most hospitable place. It had every intention of being hospitable, but it wasn't. Today in our church series, I want to talk about one of our values as a church. This is a value that we expect every person who's a part of our church to embrace. We like to say it this way: we make room for new people. We make room for new people. Hospitality is something that's so powerful, it changes all of our lives in big ways. Hospitality is not about what we do, it's about who we are. It's an ethos, it's a culture, it's something that we all want to have. And today we're going to dive into a chapter in the Bible's New Testament written by a doctor named Luke, who was a follower of Jesus. And Luke tells us about a time where Jesus enters a particular home. And it's a very strange setting and scene, but Jesus comes into this house, and here's what happens. One of the Pharisees, now a Pharisee was a person that had this uber religious mentality, very self-righteous, very, very uppity. In fact, the word Pharisee actually means separate, to be separate. And one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him, so Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. What I love about Jesus is that he ate with anybody that invited him over. He didn't have this kind of thing where I can't go to the home of a tax collector. When in that culture, a tax collector was a despised person. He would go to the home of a Pharisee, a uber religious sect of people. He went there, and when he did, a certain immoral woman from that city had heard Jesus was eating there, and she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. This is the biblical dun 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 moment. The dinner is bougie. The dinner is upscale. The dinner is awesome. And all of a sudden, the uninvited guest, who had a particular career probably, that wasn't welcome, invites herself into the context. An uninvited guest shows up because she heard Jesus was going to be there. And that was special to her. And she came with something extremely expensive. And here's what happens. She knelt down behind him, Jesus, at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. And then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. And when the Pharisee, who will find out later that his name is Simon, when Simon, who had invited him, saw this, he said to himself, he thought about this, if this man were a prophet, he would know the kind of woman that is touching him. She is a sinner. This woman of ill repute comes into a context where there's a bunch of religious people, people that think that they're more spiritual, more righteous than other people. And now this Pharisee has no culture of hospitality. He has no heart for people to feel welcome, to feel a spirit of excellence, and to feel like they have a place there. He had no desire to make her feel welcome. And for those of us that are not followers of Jesus yet, maybe this is one of the reasons why you haven't grown spiritually. You showed up at a church, you showed up at a temple, you showed up at a synagogue, and for some reason, everybody that's supposed to be righteous made you feel like a sinner. Maybe they gave you that eye like, oh my goodness, I can't believe girlfriend wore that. Maybe they kind of talked in closed circles, and when you walked in the lobby, nobody greeted you. Maybe nobody pointed you to a chair. Maybe no one acquainted you with where the bathroom was. They just made it feel as though you're an outsider, we're insiders, and you know the feeling. You're not back there this week. You know the feeling of going to a restaurant or a hotel, and they make you feel as though you're not welcome. And as Christians, we believe that Jesus is a full expression of who God is. When you read about Jesus doing certain things in the scriptures, you can understand exactly who God is. And so Jesus says, Simon, let me talk to you for a second. He said, I have something to say to you. And Simon says, all right, well, go ahead, teacher. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. But neither of them could repay him, so he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? And Simon was right. He answered. He said, well, I suppose the one for whom got the larger cancellation of debt. And Jesus said, yeah, that's right. Now watch what happens. Verse 44. He turned to the woman and he said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me to wash the dust off my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but the first time I came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just read is the Bible, or at least the New Testament's first Yelp review. Jesus gets all up in the comments. And he says, okay, if you're going to go to Simon's house, just let me let you know, they didn't wash my feet. They didn't anoint my head with oil. I'm going to let you know they didn't come out and give the proper service. Are you tracking with me? When Jesus gets in your comments, there's a problem, everybody. Jesus gives a Yelp review and he says, in other words, you have not made me feel hospitable even though you invited me into your context. But this person of ill repute, this immoral person allegedly, was the one that poured out a culture of hospitality. You didn't make room for new people, but she did. And watch the nuance of the scripture. This is very, very powerful. In verses 44 through 47, it's significant. All throughout the dinner, Jesus' back is to the woman. Remember, Luke is giving us meticulous detail. He's a doctor. He says that she came behind him. Jesus' feet were dusty. Remember, they walked. They didn't have Birkenstocks. They didn't have... His feet were dirty. And she's weeping, washing his feet with her tears, which means she's crying profusely. She knows who she is. She knows she doesn't belong there. She uses her hair and she dries his feet. And all of that time, she's doing that while Jesus is talking. Watch this, everybody, to Simon. Jesus is giving the Yelp review to Simon. And then, with meticulous detail, verse 44, the Bible says, he turned to the woman who was behind him, and he still keeps talking to Simon. He gives the Yelp review, but he turns his back on somebody who's not hospitable. Could it be that when we don't show a culture of hospitality, Jesus pivots in the opposite direction and he talks to the person that feels like the outsider, that feels like they're the person that doesn't belong? Could it be that Jesus is turning his back on many North American churches because they don't make people feel hospitable? because they don't make room for new people. Jesus turned his back on a culture that didn't make room for new people. This woman washed his feet. She did it with her tears. Simon didn't even give him a kiss on his face. She said, I'll kiss his feet. He didn't get his head anointed with oil. This woman said, I'll anoint his feet. And here's what Jesus says. I tell you, her sins, and I love how Luke and Jesus says it here, and they are many. You know, some of us are in this house, and Jesus is talking about us. He's like, their sins, many, a lot, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love, but a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. I really believe that one of the reasons why we are not as hospitable as we should be is because many of us don't remember who we are before we met Jesus. A lot of us, you're like, well, I grew up in church, but you were still a problem child. Talk to your Sunday school teachers. They hated you. They retired. You were not that good. Right? A lot of us don't remember what it feels like to be an outsider. And that's one of the reasons why we might not show the hospitality that we should. But at our church, we make room for new people. We don't care what their background is. We don't care how many times they did what they've done. We don't care what their sexuality is, what their race is, what their background is. We make room for new people at our church with a robust culture of hospitality. Otherwise, all we are is uber religious people that think we're in the in crowd. This is what happened with the Pharisees. They were self-serving. This is why Jesus had to rebuke them before. He says, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. They love to be the people that were on the cover of TMZ, who wore it best, right? They're walking around and they want everybody to acknowledge them. They like the best seats in the house. And you're saying, well, okay, now you guys are sitting on wooden seats. In a month and a half, you're going to be sitting on bougie seats. December 4th, you're going to chew your gum different. You're going to be like, in that culture of this is my seat, this is my row, this is where I sit every week, this is, oh yeah. That thing can raise its head so much. And when a person comes in, they feel like I don't have a place to sit. The chairs that we have that are sitting at 275 Mamaroneck Avenue right now, I hope that there's a culture where everybody always feels like our church will give up our seat for somebody that's new. We make room for new people. That's what we do. And we're not self-righteous. This is why Jesus rebuked them again. He said, you hypocrites, you shut the door of the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves and you don't let others enter either. A culture of a lack of hospitality was like my living room growing up as a kid. It was a place that you could look at, but a place that you couldn't enter. And a lot of people are looking on the outside saying, I really would like to go in there, but it seems a little bit too sanctified. Seems a little bit too holy for my kind. It looks pretty, it looks good, but it won't let me in. And the people seem to block me out of it as well. Listen, the premise of his thinking was if Jesus knew this woman was a sinner, he would have nothing to do with her. Jesus actually proved that he was a prophet because he read his thoughts. And remember, Luke said Simon was thinking this and Jesus spoke to his thoughts. So Jesus already established who he was. Listen to me, everybody. The closer we are to Jesus, the further we will be from sin. Okay? But can I break it down a little bit more for you? The closer we are to Jesus is also the closer we will be to sinners. So if you're saying, oh yeah, well, I got a strong relationship with God, but you're not in proximity to people that are far from God but close to you, I might challenge your thoughts. We make room for new people. So at our church, we institutionalize hospitality. It's a part of who we are in every single detail of our church, in our culture, in our vibe. Listen to me. I like to think of our church in 4 ways. Number 1, I like to think of it as a hotel. Not the Red Roof Inn. More like the culture of the 4 seasons. Excellence, in every environment. Why do we put so much detail into making sure there's no typos on the screen? Because I don't want anybody to say, we worship you, Lord. He's the Lord, not the Lord, okay? And he's not the Lord, L-E-R-D. We want excellence in every detail. It's why we do the best in environments like this to make sure the bathrooms smell well and that there's some coffee and there's people that are directing you someplace. Why? Because we make room for new people, and we want to do it with 5-star service for everybody that comes into our context. I think of our church as a hospital. Why? Jesus said he didn't come to save the righteous. He came for the sick. And so we have to see ourselves as a hospital. We have bedside manners. We don't talk to people aggressively. We don't make them feel bad. We don't condemn people when they come into our church. We make them feel as though they can be healed of any ailment that they have, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, physically, that the Lord is in this place, so we act like a hospital. And guess what? Sometimes we got to get in the triage, the emergency room. We got to let people know when they're coming in, we're going to give you amazing care through the Spirit of God. And I think of our church at times as a homeless shelter, because New York is a place where there's a lot of transients. And people aren't plugged into the soil of New York all the time, and that's okay. There are people here at this church. You may not be here in 4 years. That's all right. You know what we're going to do? We're going to give dignity to every person that is a part of our church for 5 weeks or 5 years. We're going to make them feel like this is a home that's worthy of them staying. And guess what? We're going to send you off to another church being a better Christian, a better person, a better parent, a better co-worker, so that pastor doesn't want to retire when you get there, all right? So we're a household. We're a home. That's how I think about our church. We're a place that you can feel safe. And I just want to tell you, this is a home that you can buy into. We don't lease with an option to buy at this church. We look for owners, not renters, people that want to move with the vision and where it's going. And at our church, we believe that spiritual growth is measured in steps. And it's like going into somebody's house and being in the foyer, but then getting all the way to the living room, right? And the more you walk into this home is the more responsibility that you take on. So for instance, I hate my dog Kingston. But because I live in my house, I have a responsibility to walk that little dog sometimes. I don't like it, but it's also my responsibility because I love my home. And there are lots of us today that are a part of this home, but you don't have responsibility yet. You're not serving in the house and making it flourish and making it a place that we can make room for new people. Have you ever had a sibling and you were the only one that did the chores in the house? What'd you want to do? Kick your sibling in the throat, right in the larynx. Because if you're the only one that's washing dishes, it's frustrating. We're trying to create a culture where everybody in our church makes room for new people. How do we do that? We all take on a responsibility. We all look throughout the scriptures. Look through Luke 15 when Jesus is describing the house of the Father. Everybody had a responsibility. Some people are doing stuff out in the field. Some people are doing something in the house. This is why we continue to push things like discovery. Discovery is our way of helping people on board to love the home so that we can make room for new people. We're getting ready to move into 18,000 square foot of building, which means we need some more people with the spirit of walking Kingston. So I'm going to invite you to get involved in the next round of Discovery if you haven't yet. We're not doing this because we need it. We're doing this because you need it. You need to feel the ownership of the house. You need to feel the weight. Why? Because we make room for new people. Now listen to me, everybody. Imagine what would happen if we actually believed that God was seeking to save the lost every week. That God was actually on mission. That God would use us in some profound and powerful way, even though our lives are not fully put together and we've got our own weaknesses and our habits and our issues. But God's like, I want to use you in my mission to create room for new people. Wouldn't that be amazing if we shared that responsibility? Think about it. The dude that you work out with every week that grunts every time he drops the weights, that gets on your nerves, that you would make room for him to be at a new church? What about the person that you have to do that business dinner with that has the loud mouth and the horrible tone, but you're really trying to get his account, but for some reason, your spirit of hospitality comes across at that business dinner that he asks or she asks, what is it about you that makes you so different? Hospitality is not what we do. Hospitality is who we are. And when we embody that culture, we make room for new people. Let me just say something to you. If you don't know anything about me, if you're new to our church, I am unapologetically obsessed with people. I love people. I can be around people all the time. My wife has to help me to just be by myself sometimes. I love people. I want to be around people all the time. I'm curious about people, all kinds of people. I don't care what you do, what you think. I don't care if you're a communist. I don't care what you are. I just am interested in people because that's what Jesus was about. He wanted to make room for new people all the time, people far from his Father but close to him. I am interested in reaching people from Pelham to Peekskill and every borough of New York City. Listen to me. We're outward focused. That's what makes us a little bit different maybe from the church that you used to attend. We believe that the best way to be inwardly healthy is to make room for new people, to be outwardly focused. And let me just tell you, this is important because otherwise you're going to hate our church long term. I'm just going to be honest with you. You're going to hate our church long term because we make room for new people. What does that mean? That means you're going to have to get comfortable with packed out auditoriums at a time that you like to go to church. You're going to have to get comfortable with the idea that we are fired up to reach people that are far from God, that we make nods for unchurched people in our audiences. And if you consider yourself a mature Christian, then consider the people that were mature in the Bible and what they did, like Paul. His whole life, he was obsessed with making room for new people. It's a key sign to spiritual maturity when you go from just attending church and receiving its messages to becoming a person that says, I just make room for new people. I just figure out how to make room for new people. I save a seat next to me. I put a hoodie on it just for a new person, not to save it for anybody else. I just do that because I want somebody new sitting next to me. I make room for new people. You see, we are designed to make a difference. That difference is an eternal one, and it's about making a blessing and a betterment to somebody else. Listen to me. There has to be some correlation between lower participation in the life of a church and lower impact in the lives of people outside the church. When there's lower participation for people inside of a church, we make less impact on people outside of the church. This is why I'm calling you to a different level of ownership, to gather on Sundays regularly. Thank you for being here today. It matters. Not only for you to be spiritually filled, it matters for new people to see this diversity in this audience here. That's why we ask people to group ritualistically, to get together with small groups of people during the week. Because why? We make room for new people, not just on Sundays. We make room for them midweek. And we give relentlessly. So many Christians, listen to me, they don't have a mentality for making room for new people. And the season that we're getting ready to go into with this new building on December 4th is all about, hey, Mamaroneck, hey, Larchmont, hey, White Plains, hey, Rybrook, hey, Tuckahoe, hey, Eastchester, hey, everybody. This is a place for new people. I was in Norwalk a couple years ago. I may have told this story once, so if you've heard it before, forgive me. But I was in Norwalk one time with my family. We were driving up to go to God's favorite restaurant, Chick-fil-A, because they don't got one in Westchester yet. Trying to get some Jesus chicken. And that manna I was talking about last week. And so we were driving, and we stopped at a stop sign, and on this post was a sign for a lost kitten, and it said $10,000 reward in Norwalk. I was in Norwalk, okay? So you're not talking about Queens, Flatbush, right? Norwalk, super affluent, $10,000. And I looked at it. Let me just tell you, I got out the car. I was like, hey, kitty, kitty. Hey, kitty, kitty. I wrote down the number, and the devil was getting all up in my brain. The devil was like, where's the local pet shop? Can we get a kitten that look? I was about to dye a kitten. I was going to do whatever I could to get that $10,000 reward. And yet, I lose things all the time. I lose my Apple AirPod things. I hate those little white chiclets that we stick in our ears and just lose them all the time. And when I lose those things, man, I'll do anything to find it. I'm going all over the place trying to find some things. And why can't I find it? What is it about us where we'll put so many hours and energy into lost possessions, but not lost people? $10,000 for a cat? Can't you buy a lion for $10,000? Like, where can I buy Simba or Mufasa for $10,000? But they had a strong desire because they had an attachment to a possession. What would happen if we had the same thing for lost people and decided that we would do anything short of sin to make room for new people? See, we all have memories of our parents, our neighbors, or our friends protecting the furniture in their house with plastic covers. If you're from the Caribbean, you got a auntie with that in her house right now, 2022. You know, if you're from Trinidad, Jamaica, or something, your auntie proud of this. The pillows are covered in plastic. The runway to the living room has the plastic thing on it. Covered in plastic. Remember those days? And if it was hot in the house and you sat watching TV, you came off that thing sounding like Velcro. God forbid if you ever wore shorts on one of these. If it was cold in there, it cracked the plastic. They covered their furniture with plastic. We're heading into a new pristine building. It's expensive. But that immoral woman, she brought something expensive so that she could have wordless worship to Jesus. Our building is wordless worship to a new community that, hey, we're making room for new people because Jesus is here. That's what it's about. So it may be great cost, but the question is, are we going to start covering ourselves with plastic? Are we going to be the kind of people that, just appear righteous and we're just so good and we're just so, or are we going to be real people that allow people to feel like, oh, I can fit in here? Because the thing about plastic is that people actually need to see stains that can be cleaned, not furniture that just needs to be covered. And if we're the righteousness of God, I think it's time to make an environment where people feel like, I can sit in here. My grandma, she used to have plastic fruit on the table. That's the next level of plastic fruit, of plastic. Bananas, all that stuff. I'm telling you, they never dried up. It was spiritual. The apples never had worms or anything in it. They were just plastic. We used to throw them at each other. They collected dust. There are many churches that have plastic fruit of the Spirit. Looks like they have joy. Looks like they have peace. But they're nothing more than what my grandmother had on her table. I'm trying to tell you, a culture that doesn't welcome new people is a culture that puts plastic on couches and puts plastic fruit out to display and say, yeah, that's hospitality. But a real culture says, hey, if you're stained, we'll clean it up afterwards. After you leave, we'll take care of the spill. After you leak a little bit of your stuff, well, don't worry about it. We got people that will take care of that. Let me say this boldly, everybody. This world is not our home. And too often, many of us are acting like the world has made a guest room for us. The world has not made a guest room for us. We're getting a little bit too comfortable. We're a little bit too like, so what, No, I'm trying to put a passion for evangelism inside of you. I'm trying to put a passion for new people inside of you. I'm trying to put a passion for your friends at the gym inside of you. Listen, the world doesn't have a guest room, but Jesus does. Jesus does. I'll prove it to you. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me as well. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you, right? He says, I go to prepare a place for you. Wait. Jesus, you go to prepare. Yeah, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and welcome you into my presence. Why? Jesus has a spirit of hospitality, and he says, you know what I do? With my death, with my burial, with my resurrection, I make room for new people. That's the good news. That's the gospel. Let me close with it this way. In Jesus' culture, rooms were added on as a family grew through birth and marriage. So some translations say, in my Father's house, there's many mansions, and people preach it, right? They're like, man, I can't wait to see my mansion. I'm going to a heavenly Chappaqua. My God, Lord, there's a holy Norwalk that I'm going to. Streets of, no. This is the right culture here, right? Jesus was saying, because it's often translated poorly, Jesus was saying, this is my Father's house. He creates many guest rooms, dwelling places. Just like in that ancient Near Eastern culture, they would have known what he was talking about. Jesus is saying, my Father's house is filled with many guest rooms because of the sacrifice that I am going to do. So, hey, everybody, would you partner with me and the rest of the church and say, hey, we make room for new people?
What's up, everybody? We just finished our service. We're in week number 4 of our church. I preached about the Bible's first Yelp review. Did you know that the Bible has a Yelp review? Jesus turned his back on somebody that didn't provide a great sense of hospitality. And at our church, we make room for new people. I want to remind you one more time, our building is opening up on December 4th. You want to invest and invite your friends. We're getting ready to move down to Mamaroneck. I want you to join us. Again, subscribe. Keep up with all the messages. Lots of energy, lots of joy that's going to help you in your week. Let's go. Why are you still looking at me? Go subscribe.